Clara Norman was 38 when she drove from Hartford to her parents' house in Ridgefield, Pennsylvania, on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. The trunk of her car was packed with catered food she had paid for herself: turkey, sides, pies, enough for 25 people. She had covered Thanksgiving dinner for 6 straight years, and nobody ever thanked her. When she entered through the side door, her younger sister Mirabelle was in the kitchen arranging crackers and cheese like a proud hostess. Their mother, Olivia, stood beside her fixing napkin rings. Olivia barely looked up. "There you are," she said. "Put the food on the counter." No hug. No smile. Mirabelle waved a cracker and said, "You're late." Clara set down the tray and answered, "I said 4 o'clock. It's barely past." Mirabelle only shrugged. Clara kept unloading food, already feeling like a guest in a house she helped keep alive. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post for notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Clara had not always understood how much of that house rested on her shoulders. But numbers never lied. She had co-signed the second mortgage when her parents were desperate. She had paid for the kitchen update, the roof repair, and even the deposit for Mirabelle's nail salon. For 8 years, she had also sent money every month for her mother's medical bills and her father's insurance. It all began with a promise she had made beside her grandmother Rose's hospital bed. "Keep them together, Bertie," Grandma Rose had whispered. Clara had nodded and taken those words into her bones. Now, standing in the kitchen, she noticed an envelope near the toaster from First Heritage Bank. The flap looked opened and pressed shut again. Clara picked it up. Before she could inspect it, Mirabelle stepped close and snapped, "Don't touch that. It's Mom and Dad's mail." Clara slowly set it down, but she did not forget it. By evening, the house was packed with relatives. Aunt Delinda arrived with wine, cousins came with casseroles, children ran through the hallway, and the whole place smelled like cinnamon and roasted meat. Clara's father, Henry, stayed in his recliner with the remote, nodding at people without really joining them. Olivia floated around the living room, introducing Mirabelle like a prize. "Our Mirabelle is doing so well," she said. "Her business is growing beautifully." Clara kept silent, though she knew the salon had been losing money for months. When a cousin asked Clara what she did for work, Olivia answered before Clara could speak. "Oh, she works up north. Some office job." Clara tightened her grip on her glass. She was the director of business development for a major construction firm, but here she was reduced to some office job. Later in the hallway, Mirabelle grabbed her arm and whispered, "Don't mention the loan. I told Mom it was all handled." That night Clara slept on the pull-out couch in the den, though sleep hardly came. She lay in darkness listening to the old house settle and replaying Mirabelle's warning. Around dawn, she got up before everyone else, just as Grandma Rose had taught her. "The first one up owns the day," her grandmother used to say. Clara made coffee, then saw the bank envelope again. This time it was in the recycling bin under a cereal box. The flap was ripped open. She reached down, pulled it free, and looked through the opening. The paper inside carried a bold header, "Deed Transfer Notification." Her chest tightened. She quickly snapped a photo with her phone and shoved the envelope back. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Clara grabbed a potato peeler just as Olivia entered in her robe. "Good," Olivia said, pouring herself coffee. "Peel the potatoes." Clara forced her hands steady and began peeling, but one thought would not leave her mind. What had they done with that deed? Thanksgiving afternoon came loud and crowded. 25 people squeezed around the extended table while football played in the next room. Clara sat at the far end near the kitchen door, the seat closest to the exit. Henry sat at the head, Olivia beside him, and Mirabelle near the center like royalty. "Mirabelle, sweet girl, say grace," Olivia said. Mirabelle folded her hands and thanked God for family, for love, and for everything Mom and Dad do for us. Clara lowered her eyes. After dinner, everyone moved into the living room. Clara was carrying plates when she heard Mirabelle say, "Mom gave it to me last week." Clara turned and froze. On Mirabelle's finger was Grandma Rose's sapphire ring, the one promised to Clara years ago. "Where did you get that?" Clara asked. Mirabelle smiled. "Mom said Grandma would have wanted me to have it." Olivia nodded. "She's here every day. She deserves it." Clara stood still, holding the plates, while something deep inside her began to crack. Clara set the plates in the sink and turned on the water, letting it run just to drown out the noise in her head. Behind her, laughter filled the living room as if nothing had happened. Mirabelle's voice carried above the rest, bright and sharp, telling another story that twisted the past. Clara dried her hands slowly and stepped back toward the doorway. "Remember when Clara cried at her science fair?" Mirabelle said. "She always needed attention." A few people laughed nervously. Clara spoke quietly. "That's not true." Olivia cut in immediately. "Don't start today, Clara." Henry added, "Enough," without even looking up from the TV. Clara felt the familiar weight settle on her shoulders, the one that always came when truth was pushed aside for comfort. Across the room, Aunt Nora caught her eye and mouthed, "Not here." Clara nodded once, but inside, something had already begun to shift. Clara tried to steady herself. She told herself it was just one more day, one more dinner, one more moment to endure. She moved through the room quietly, offering polite smiles, answering small questions, playing her usual role. But she kept watching Mirabelle. Her sister laughed too loudly, moved too confidently, and kept glancing at Clara like she was measuring her silence. Every now and then, Mirabelle's hand brushed the sapphire ring, as if reminding herself it was there. Clara felt a tight pressure in her chest. That ring was more than jewelry. It was a promise broken. It was another piece of her life taken and handed to someone else. She reached for a glass of water and stood near the fireplace, trying to breathe. The room felt smaller by the second. Conversations blurred together. Faces blended. All Clara could hear was her own heartbeat and her grandmother's voice echoing faintly in her memory. The moment came quietly. Clara stood to get water and moved between the coffee table and the couch where Mirabelle sat. Her shoulder brushed Mirabelle's arm, barely a touch, the kind that happens in crowded rooms all the time. But Mirabelle went still. Completely still. The room seemed to notice before Clara did. Conversations slowed. A silence spread like a ripple. Mirabelle turned her head slowly, eyes locking onto Clara's. There was no confusion there. Only something cold. Clara opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Mirabelle's hand lifted. For a second, Clara thought it was nothing. Then the hand came down hard. The sound cracked through the room. Clara's head snapped to the side. Her cheek burned instantly. "Are you blind or just stupid?" Mirabelle's voice cut through the silence. 25 people watched. No one moved. No one spoke. Clara straightened slowly, her face stinging, her eyes watering from the shock. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Clara stood still, waiting for someone, anyone, to say something. Olivia moved first. She crossed the room quickly, and for a brief second, Clara thought her mother was coming to her. Instead, Olivia stopped in front of her and said, "Say sorry or get out." Clara blinked. "She hit me." Olivia's face hardened. "You provoked her. You always do." Clara turned to her father. Henry had already stood up. Without a word, he walked to the front door, opened it, and held it wide. Cold air rushed in. He didn't look at her. He just stood there, waiting. Like she didn't belong. Like she was a stranger. Clara looked around the room. 25 faces, all silent, all avoiding her eyes. The choice had already been made. Not by her. By them. Clara picked up her coat from the chair and walked toward the door. She didn't rush. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. As she passed her father, she paused for a second, close enough to see the lines on his face. He still didn't look at her. She stepped outside. The cold hit her cheek, sharp and clean against the sting of the slap. Behind her, the door shut. The lock clicked. Clara walked to her car, the gravel crunching under her shoes. She sat behind the wheel and stared at the house glowing with warm light, filled with people who had chosen silence over truth. After a long minute, she started the engine and drove away. The road stretched ahead into darkness. She didn't turn on the radio. She didn't call anyone. She just drove. And somewhere along that empty highway, something inside her finally let go. Clara reached her apartment late that night. The parking lot was quiet, and the cold air felt sharper now that she was alone. She sat in her car for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Then she remembered Mirabelle's warning and the envelope. As she stepped out, she walked straight to the mailbox. Inside were a few envelopes, bills, junk mail, and one official-looking letter from the county recorder's office. Clara tore it open under the dim light. Her eyes moved quickly across the page, then stopped. The words didn't make sense at first. Then they did. Her name had been removed from the property deed. A new name had been added. Mirabelle Norman. Clara's breath caught. At the bottom were signatures, her parents', Mirabelle's, and one more. Her name. Signed in handwriting that was not hers. Clara walked into her apartment without taking off her coat. She sat at the kitchen table, spread the document flat, and stared at it again. The signature was close, but wrong. Too smooth. Too careless. Someone had forged her name. She opened her laptop, scanned every page, and sent it to Marcus Lane, a real estate attorney she trusted. Her message was simple. This is fraud. She hit send and leaned back in her chair. The room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. For the first time, Clara felt something stronger than hurt. It wasn't anger exactly. It was clarity. Everything that had felt off, every quiet dismissal, every lie, it all lined up now. She had not just been ignored. She had been erased. Her phone buzzed early the next morning. Marcus's voice came through, calm but firm. Clara, this is serious. Do not sign anything. We need to act fast. Monday morning, Clara sat across from Marcus in his office. He laid out the facts carefully. Your name was removed from the deed 3 weeks ago, he said. And this signature, he tapped the page, is not yours. Clara nodded. What does that mean? Marcus looked at her directly. It means forgery. Real estate fraud. He slid another document forward. There's more. After the transfer, a home equity line of credit was opened. $85,000. Clara felt her chest tighten. In whose name? Mirabelle's, Marcus replied. Approved based on the equity you built. Clara leaned back slowly. $85,000. Taken from something she had spent years paying for. Where did the money go? Marcus answered, mostly into her business account. The rest covered personal debt. Clara closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them and said, steady and clear, what do we do next? Marcus drafted the letters that same day. Formal notices to Mirabelle, to Olivia and Henry, and to the bank. The language was direct. Restore Clara's name, freeze the credit line, account for every dollar. 15 days to respond. No exceptions. Clara watched as the letters were sealed. Then she pulled out her phone and opened her banking app. One by one, she canceled every automatic payment she had set up over the years. The monthly transfers. The insurance support. The extra deposits. 8 years of financial help ended in minutes. Marcus glanced at her. You're sure? Clara nodded. They used my name to steal from me. I'm done funding that. He gave a small, approving nod. Then we proceed. Clara left his office feeling something unfamiliar. Lightness. Not peace, not yet. But the weight she had carried for years had shifted. And for the first time, she was no longer carrying it alone. 5 days later, Olivia called. Clara answered. Something's wrong with the bank, Olivia said, her voice tight. The payment didn't go through. Clara stood by her kitchen counter, calm. I canceled it. Silence filled the line. Then, what do you mean you canceled it? Clara replied, I stopped paying for a house I no longer own. Olivia's voice rose. This is your family. Clara said evenly, family doesn't forge signatures. There was a pause. Then Henry's voice came on, low and tired. Don't do this, Clara. She closed her eyes briefly. I'm not the one who did anything wrong. She ended the call before he could answer. Her phone buzzed again and again afterward. Calls, messages, names flashing across the screen. Clara ignored them all. She made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the morning light spread across the floor. For the first time in years, the silence felt like something she owned. The calls didn't stop that day. Mirabel called 6 times, Olivia 3, Henry twice, and even a number Clara didn't recognize once. Clara let them all ring out. By evening, a voicemail came through from Mirabel. This time, she was crying. Real crying, not the polished version Clara had seen her perform. You can't do this to me, she said. I'll fix it, I swear. Clara listened once, then deleted it. The next morning, Mirabel called again, her voice shaking. Mom and Dad told me it was fine, she said. They said you wouldn't care. Clara stood still, absorbing that. The blame passed neatly away. Then they can explain that, Clara replied calmly. To a lawyer. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. You're going to destroy this family, Mirabel whispered. Clara's voice didn't rise. No, she said. I just stopped holding it together. 15 days passed without any response to Marcus's letters. No lawyer contacted them. No corrections were made. No money returned. Only silence, and one social media post from Mirabel about toxic family members who use money to control others. Clara took a screenshot and sent it to Marcus. His reply was immediate. We proceed. The next morning, a formal complaint was filed. The charges were clear: forgery and real estate fraud. The deed was flagged in public records, freezing any sale or refinancing of the house. The bank suspended the credit line. The system moved quietly but firmly. Clara went to work that day like any other. She reviewed contracts, attended meetings, and made decisions worth millions. But beneath that normal routine, something had shifted. For the first time, she wasn't reacting to her family. She was responding, with clarity, with boundaries, with law. The impact came quickly. Within days, the credit line Mirabel depended on was frozen. The salon, already struggling, began to collapse. Rent was due. Supplies couldn't be paid for. Employees started asking questions. Derek, Mirabel's husband, sent Clara a late-night message. She used that money for everything, he admitted. I told her not to do the deed thing. Clara read the message twice, then put her phone down. She didn't feel satisfaction, just a quiet understanding. The structure she had supported for years was falling because she had stepped away, and it had never been stable to begin with. By the end of the week, the landlord posted a notice on the salon door. Pay or leave. The story Mirabel told at Thanksgiving, about growth, success, expansion, collapsed under reality. And this time, Clara didn't step in to fix it. A few days later, Henry called again. Clara answered. His voice sounded older, worn. This has gone too far, he said. Clara stood by her window, looking out at the quiet street. She forged my signature, Dad. There was a pause. She made a mistake, he said. Clara's voice sharpened slightly. No. A mistake is forgetting something. This was a decision. Henry sighed heavily. What do you want? Clara answered without hesitation. My name restored. The credit line closed. And accountability. The word hung in the air. Henry spoke again, softer now. If you keep going, your mother won't forgive you. Clara closed her eyes briefly. She told me to apologize after I was hit, she said. I think I'll survive that. There was nothing left to say. The call ended quietly, like everything else between them. Weeks passed. The investigation moved forward. Mirabel hired a lawyer. The salon shut down before the end of the month. Derek moved out soon after. The story spread quietly through their town, through neighbors, through church, through public records anyone could access. People remembered things. They remembered Clara paying for repairs, writing checks, showing up quietly. They also remembered Mirabel taking credit. Slowly, the narrative shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. Clara stayed in Hartford, living her life. She went to work, came home, and sat in her apartment without the constant pressure she had carried for years. One evening, she opened her nightstand drawer and looked at her grandmother's sapphire ring, returned to her by Aunt Nora. She held it in her palm, feeling its weight. Not heavy, but meaningful. Clara slipped it onto her finger and sat back in silence. For the first time, that silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. By early spring, the legal process tightened around everything Mirabel had tried to hide. The district attorney's office moved forward with the case, and the evidence was clear. The forged signature, the bank records, the timing of the credit line, it all connected. Mirabel was called in for questioning, and this time there was no room for performance. No audience. No sympathy. Just facts. Clara didn't attend. She didn't need to. Marcus handled everything, updating her only when necessary. One afternoon, he called and said, "They're offering a plea deal." Clara stood by her window, watching people pass below. "What does that mean?" she asked. "Probation," Marcus said. "And full repayment of the money taken." Clara nodded slowly. It wasn't justice in the way movies showed it. But it was accountability. And for her, that was enough. Mirabel accepted the deal. 2 years of supervised probation and full restitution of the $85,000. She didn't have the money, so the payments would stretch over years. The salon was gone permanently. The employees had moved on. Derek filed for divorce, and it went through quietly. The life Mirabel had built on borrowed credit and someone else's sacrifice had collapsed completely. Olivia stopped calling. Henry didn't try again. The silence from that house was total now. But it felt different than before. Before, it had been filled with expectation. Now, it was empty of control. Clara no longer felt pulled toward it. She simply existed outside of it. And that distance gave her something she hadn't realized she needed: space to see everything clearly. One afternoon, Aunt Nora came to visit Clara. She brought a small bag and set it on the kitchen table. Inside was a folded letter and a familiar velvet box. "From your father," Nora said gently. Clara hesitated before opening it. The letter was written in Henry's careful handwriting. He apologized, not with excuses, but with quiet honesty. He admitted he had known Clara carried more than her share for years. He admitted he stayed silent when he should have spoken. At the end, he wrote, "You deserved better from me." Clara folded the letter slowly. Then she opened the velvet box. Inside was Grandma Rose's sapphire ring. Nora watched her closely. "He took it back from Mirabel," she said. Clara held the ring in her hand, feeling something shift inside her again. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something softer than anger. Life settled into a new rhythm. Clara focused on her work, her routines, and the quiet of her apartment. She cooked simple meals, took evening walks, and stopped checking her phone for messages that no longer came. Sometimes, on long drives to job sites, she passed the highway exit that led to her parents' town. She didn't take it. Not yet. But she didn't look away either. The past was still there, but it no longer controlled her direction. One evening, she sat at her table with a glass of wine and the sapphire ring on her finger. The small flaw in the setting caught the light. She remembered her grandmother saying, "The flaw is part of the story." Clara smiled faintly. Her story had flaws too. Years of silence, years of giving without limits. But those flaws didn't define her anymore. Aunt Nora visited again a few weeks later. They cooked together, just like Clara used to with Grandma Rose. The kitchen filled with warmth and the sound of quiet conversation. "Your father misses you," Nora said gently. Clara stirred the pot and nodded. "Missing me isn't the same as respecting me," she replied. Nora didn't argue. She simply said, "No, it isn't." They ate at the small table, sharing food and silence in a way that felt honest. Before leaving, Nora paused at the door. "You did the right thing," she said. "The hard thing and the right thing." Clara stood there after she left, letting those words settle. For years, she had believed keeping the family together meant sacrificing herself. Now she understood something different. Holding people together should never mean breaking yourself apart. By late spring, everything had settled into its final shape. The legal case was closed, the payment scheduled, and the house no longer carried Clara's name or responsibility. She had sold her share back for $1, not because it was worthless, but because she no longer wanted any part of it. That dollar marked an ending, not of anger, but of obligation. Clara stood in her apartment one evening, looking around the small space she had built for herself. It wasn't large. It wasn't perfect. But it was hers. Every bill, every decision, every quiet moment belonged only to her now. And that ownership felt more valuable than anything she had ever invested in her family. She no longer replayed Thanksgiving in her mind. The slap, the silence, the open door, they had once echoed constantly. Now, they felt distant, like something that had happened to someone else. Not forgotten, but no longer sharp. Clara understood something she hadn't before. That moment hadn't broken her. It had revealed the truth. It showed her exactly where she stood and what she had been carrying alone for years. And once she saw it clearly, she could finally put it down. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in quiet moments, in mornings without anxiety, in evenings without obligation, in days that passed without her needing to fix anything for anyone else. Sometimes, Clara thought about Olivia and Henry. She wondered if they sat in that same living room, if they noticed the absence she left behind. She wondered if they understood what it had cost her to stay all those years. But she didn't reach for her phone. Not because she didn't care, but because she had learned that caring didn't require returning to a place that had hurt her. Forgiveness, she realized, was not the same as access. She could wish them well without reopening the door they had once closed on her. That understanding gave her peace, not loud, overwhelming peace, but steady, quiet peace that stayed. One warm evening, Clara opened her nightstand drawer and took out the sapphire ring again. She held it under the light, watching the deep blue stone catch and reflect it. The small flaw in the setting was still there, unchanged. She slipped the ring onto her finger and looked at it for a long moment. Grandma Rose had once told her to keep the family together. Clara had tried. 4 years, she had tried. But now she understood something her grandmother hadn't said out loud, that even the strongest bridge has limits. And when too much weight is placed on it, it must choose whether to collapse or to stand for itself. Clara stood by her window, looking out at the quiet street below. Her life was simple now, but it was honest. No hidden expectations. No silent debts. No roles to perform. She was no longer the person holding everything together. She was the person who chose herself. And that choice had changed everything. She didn't know what the future would bring, whether she would speak to her parents again, or if time would soften what had been broken. But she knew this much: she would never again shrink herself to fit into a place where she was not valued. Clara touched the ring lightly and smiled, a real, steady smile. For the first time in years, she wasn't carrying the weight of a family. She was carrying her own life. And that was enough. If you're still here, I truly appreciate you, more than you realize. And if this story brought someone to mind, consider sharing it with them. Sometimes people just need to hear that it's okay to stop overgiving. If you want more stories like this, check the description. I've left one there that will resonate just as deeply. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.